What's up guys, here's even more useless information about every single League of Legends champion. Old Aatrox was going to have an ability that offered a chance for teammates to become a Darken so they'd both get a revive effect when his ultimate was cast. They also had to accept a blood price to do it, which was left behind after he queued, and if they did it, they'd burn to death, but they'd die and revive at the same time. This is an actual clip of what it would have looked like. Also, something fun worth noting here is how the effect looks exactly like Kane's ultimate is today. Pretty interesting. Speaking of scrapped abilities, Ahri was fairly close to getting a global dash for her ultimate, which just might have caused some problems. Just maybe. Kali has a voice line where she says,
"Steel beats rock, Talia,"
which is a reference to Pokemon and how rock types are weak to steel types in game. Noxian is approximately 5 foot 10 inches according to his lore. If you're looking to get a ton of helpful information while playing League, you need to check out an app called Professor, who is also the sponsor of today's video. Professor is an incredible app that does amazing things for you, like import the best runes for you automatically. It shows you pro builds, and before each of the games, it will even scout out your opponents and give you key details on who's doing good, who's not, and it will even tell you who's already played with who. And it doesn't stop there. You can also see live in-game stats so you can see what you need to get better at. And now you even have the ability to track summoner spells, which will automatically sync with other Professor users. On top of that, there's even a new champion meta window now, which tells you the champions which are best to play right now. Seriously guys, Professor is one of the best apps out there if you're looking to improve and get an edge in the game, and it's 100% free, so there's no reason not to try it out. So make sure to download it using my link below. Thanks guys, and back to the video. Alistar was actually given the first non-official original League of Legends skin in the game on June 13th, 2009, and that skin was Black Alistar. Black Alistar is today known as one of the rare skins of the game, and it was given to people who pre-ordered the retail collector's edition. Surprise Party Amumu got locked out of his own party, and you can even see it in his splash art. Poor dude just can't catch a break. In the early stages of Anivia, there was a glitch where if you got hit by her wall in just the right way, you'd get teleported to a random location on the map. In the old League of Legends lore, Tibber was actually a shadow bear from the Voodoo lands who became known as Tibbers. This is very different from the new lore where Tibbers was just a normal teddy bear crafted by Annie's mom. There used to be a version of Aphelios' flamethrower that allowed Aphelios to burn turrets. During the alpha stages, one of Ash's abilities was called Pierce, but the name was later passed down to Callista for her Q ability. Aurelian Soul in the cinematic Aurelian Soul the Starforger Returns is a reference to Riot's old intro. Azir was actually leaked on Reddit all the way back in 2013, and this was the actual post. Some sounds for Bard's kit were created using tiny brass bells purchased in Los Angeles Chinatown. Elveth's attack animation changes to her thrusting at her target at exactly 1.8 attack speed. This is one of the original art concepts for Blitzcrank, and as you can see, he originally looked fairly different to what he looks like today. Someone made some fan art on what Pool Party brand could look like, and honestly, it's pretty creative. Rom was partially inspired by Alex Louise Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemist. Caitlin's Yordle Snaptrap was actually going to be an ability that could spawn brush, but this ability was later passed down to Ivern instead. Camille is an 80-year-old augmented human who has a Hextech heart, which allowed her to age much slower. Cass's auto attacks used to literally be snakes that she chucked at people, and also same with some of her abilities like her Q. You can actually see it in her champion spotlight still. Did you know that Cho'Gath's title started off as Green Terror and then moved to the Black Terror, and then finally ended at the Terror of the Void? I'm kind of bummed that we only stopped at green and black. Porky used to have an old sound effect for when he picked up a package that was an air raid siren. However, the sound was so similar to a real air raid siren that it triggered some people's anxiety and PTSD, so Riot eventually had to change it. In the lore, Darius was raised as an orphan, and he's also currently in his mid to late 30s. This YouTube channel created a real-life version of Diana's weapon. The Old Mundo's dance was a reference to Dr. House from the show House. In the lore, Draven is a bit egocentric and even has a picture of himself on his bedside table. Echo's concept and assets took 8 months to complete from start to finish. Also, one of his very first concepts looked a lot like Kane does today. Elisa's recall in her spider form is a reference to Skulltula from The Legends of Zelda. The old Eve was one of only 5 champions that was given a difficulty rating of 10 back in the day. The others were Anivia, Cass, Rumble, and Yasuo. Ezreal's old W used to actually be able to heal allies, and you can even heal yourself if you W'd and then eat into it. According to the lore, Fiddlesticks is at least 10,000 years old. I've mentioned before that Fiora was partially inspired by Marth, and it was so much so that she almost got his dancing blade added into the game. This was one of the drawn concepts for it. This is voiced by Felice Sampler, who also voiced Kennen and Toph Beifong in The Legends of Korra. In the lore, birds often nest in Galio's crown. You know, just in case you were ever wondering. Did you know that Dead Man's plate is actually what Gangplank's wearing? It's attached to his prosthetic metal arm. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but canonically, Garen doesn't actually spin around when he uses his E. He instead just repeatedly swings his sword around. Nara's boulder toss was shaped like a fist and the Riot Games logo. In the lore, Gragas brews his beer Greggy Ice from the clear waters of Freljord, and he paid a large sum to gain exclusive access to the Avarosan Iceflow Glacier for 9,000 years. This lore was inspired by Arthur Guinness, who started brewing in 1759. 1959 at St. James Fate Brewery in Dublin, where he signed a 9,000-year lease. Graves is one of the only people that still calls TF Tobias, which is his birth name. Gwen's scissors were intentionally made huge to draw similarities to Viego's blade. Hecarim has a quote where he says,
"Suffering is magic,"
which is poking at My Little Pony since their slogan is friendship is magic. Heimerdinger's quote,
"Raise your what?"
which is a reference to a tweet I'm a Cutie Pie made all the way back in 2013 where he said raise your dongers. This was one of the very first art concepts for Lowy, and honestly it looks like she's dragging a big ball of Zack around with her. Aurelia's clothing and style is heavily influenced by traditional Chinese ribbon dancers and martial artists. Ivern has a voice line where he says,
"Oh, look, a happy little cloud,"
which is a reference to the one and only Bob Ross. Janna is pretty underrated as far as how strong she is according to the lore. It was described that at her peak, she was even more powerful than most god warriors. This is Jarvan if he were a barber instead. Most people know that Jax's favorite food is eggs, but did you know that his preferred method of egg consumption is to boil them? You're welcome. Potato Jace. Jin was actually going to be spelled J-I-N, but they added in the H because they thought there'd be too much confusion with Jinx already in the game. Ironically, it works out better anyways because 4. Jinx actually has a 1% higher win rate starting with Longsword and refillable over Doran's Blade in a pot. During development, Kaisa was called John Click, which was obviously a play on John Wick. Callista has a quote where she says this to Graves.
"Give in to your hate, Graves."
Which is a reference to Palpatine in Star Wars when he says give in to your anger.
Give in to your anger.
Karma used to have 6 ranks on each of her basic abilities and only 1 on her ultimate, but of course it was eventually changed. In the 2013 Mac announcement trailer, there was an emergency box that said press R to win, which was a reference to Karthus and his ult. This is some really early concept art of Kassadin. There used to be an Easter egg in the old client where if you went to Katarina's champion page, selected her abilities, and then pressed Control 1, she'd say a unique voice line. Kale's favorite food is kale. During development, Kayn was called Nemesis, mainly because he was originally supposed to be the nemesis of Xayah and Rakan. Deadly Kennen was inspired by Deadpool. Hey guys, really quick, this video took forever to make, so if you just take a second to poke that sub button if you're enjoying it, it would mean so much to me. Thanks guys. Kha'Zix was the last champion to receive an art spotlight, which is where they would show time lapses of them creating the splash art for each of the champions. It's actually pretty cool and they should really bring it back. Kindred's mark was originally going to appear randomly over champion's head with the symbol being dubbed their coming. Skarl is from a species called Dracolops, who are immortal, unkillable wind spirits that embody the desolation of the Noxian plans. In case you didn't know, Ma is just another word for mouth, hence the name Cog Ma. LeBlanc is at least 1100 years old, but her true age isn't completely known. On April 1st, 2011, Riot released an Easter egg trailer for Lee Sin in addition to his real one, where his hidden passive was blindness and the entire screen was blind because of it. High Noon Leona has a voice line where she says,
These country roads ain't taking me home.
which is of course a reference to John Denver. Lilia used a 70% scaled down version of Sion's model during her playtesting. Also, here's a Lilia slaying Baron at level 1 because why not? Cassandra wears a helmet over her eyes because she was blinded by the claws of a primal demigod, aka Volibear. And while she's magical, she hasn't been able to restore her eyesight. Hired Gun Lucian is a reference to the Matrix and even has him sitting in a red chair with a health potion and mana potion in reference to the red and blue pill from the movie. Lulu was the first champion to be played in the PvE before her official release to the game. Here's a pretty basic breakdown of how Star Guardian Lux's ultimate was made. It was basically created from layering a bunch of different particle effects together and combining them as one. It ranged from just glows to stretched out particles for the ultimate, and then they just brought it all together. In the lore, Malphite literally translates to bad stone in Ishtali. Back in the day, Malzahar's Voidlings used to give normal creep gold instead of just +2. So whenever you went up against him, you get an insane amount of extra farm and gold. The visuals on Maokai's W, Twisted Dances, was made to resemble the rooting of Zyra's E grasping roots. Master Yi is a play on the word for mastery, which is why you always see them spamming theirs. When Gale Force was first released, there was a glitch where you could use it and then Miss Fortune's ult, and it would basically double the width of her ultimate. As you can imagine, it wasn't the funnest thing to be on the other side of. One of the versions of Mordekaiser's ultimate in development had a portal on the outside of it that allowed players to join the Death Realm voluntarily if they'd like. Morgana's W, Tormented Soul, almost had the ability to critically strike against low health targets. Nami is voiced by Cassandra Lee Morris, who is also the voice actress for Yumi. According to the lore, Nasus may be immune to Amumu's powers due to his powers connecting to death. Nautilus's first auto attack when he stuns his opponent has the longest basic attack animation in the game. Nico's Q, Blooming Burst, was actually supposed to be Silas's ability first, but it didn't work out, so they gave it to Nico instead. Basically sloppy seconds for an ability. Nidalee's original concept design was originally going to be a bit more revealing than it is today. Let's just say Riot was a lot bolder back then. In fact, there are some old splash art designs that I'm not comfortable showing on here. I'll just leave it at that. According to Riot, Neela is currently staying in Bilgewater, renting out the spare room above Oyster Bill's Oyster Shack. Thurnham Nocturne has a voice line where he says, "We have learned of spin to win, none can stop. It was a trick," which is a reference to Garen in Star Wars. Believe it or not, one of these scrapped pieces of the lore for Nunu and Willip was that they were going to be a part of a traveling circus who secretly found and hid artifacts from Lysandra. However, they eventually found out and then slaughtered the entire tribe, but not before Nunu stole a shard of true ice, which he used to create infinite snowballs. Things were almost really dark. Did you know that Broloff is the only legendary skin without a unique recall animation? He does have a quote insulting your mom to make up for it though. The bees in the Orbiana skin splash art was inspired by Baby Yoda. There was a scrapped quest that Ornn was going to have called Weapons of Legend that required the team to take 5 objectives like Dragon or Baron in order to unlock the Masterwork items. They even went as far as adding in special quotes for him for completing the quest, but they were never added into the game. Pantheon's ultimate Grand Starfall was originally going to have him coming in surfing on a bunch of rocks, and this is a quick gif of it. Poppy's red scarf was originally going to be much bigger and flowier. It was supposed to be a heroic thing, but it ended up competing too much with her pigtails and it was eventually trimmed down because of that. If you think being pulled by a hook is annoying, try getting teleported instead. That's what Pike almost had as one of his abilities. It was a kidnapping spell and this is how it was described. Pike activates a place marker on the ground and then reactivates within a window to dash in a direction. If he hit an enemy, they would both be teleported back where he placed the marker. The craziest thing about this post is it sounds like it'll probably be on a new champion one day. Quinoa's ultimate was going to be her being able to make the entire river explode. Of course, this wouldn't have been very useful outside of the river. Quinn was inspired by elite canine units. All they knew at the time for Quinn is that they wanted a champion who had a tight relationship with some sort of animal companion. Rakan has a voice line where he says this when he kills Xayah.
Hello world! I am single now!
This person made a sample of what Tron Rammus would look like, and it's actually pretty sick. This was one of the potential designs of what Rek'Sai could have looked like. Green was added in as a part of Rel's color palette because it felt military and Noxian, which is also a reflection of what she grew up around and was exposed to her whole life. And the orange and yellow hair were added in to signify her rebellion from Noxus. If you flip Renata's splash art upside down, you'll see it's actually showing her in the reflection of a puddle. Pretty cool little Easter egg. Outback Renekton's skin bio has a reference to Steve Irwin where he says, "Crikey, what a ripper!" Yep, just like that. Rengar's saber previously belonged to his former hunting mentor named Markin. In the lore, Riven was imprisoned and forced to fight in the Rockiners arena where she was extradited back to Noxus. However, she eventually escaped with the help of the Sentinels of Light. And in case you didn't notice, it's also what's happening in the Cinematic Awakening. This isn't really useless, but in my opinion, Rumble's basic tag skin is the most outdated looking basic skin in the game. It's probably because Rumble hasn't received a visual rework in the last 11 years. There was a skin called Triumphant Rise, which was only available to those who won an official Riot Games League match. It used to be called Champion Rise. Samira was originally going to have 7 grades as a part of her style meter, but one was cut after they created the assets for the 7th later. I don't know what would have come after S, but I guess we'll never know. Assassin's Creed Valhalla has a little Easter egg in it where it references Sejuani. It was Riot's intention from the beginning to introduce Senna or a version of Senna for the 10-year anniversary of League. That's some pretty freaking advanced planning. Seraphine's dance is just her playing Dance Dance Revolution, and somehow I've never noticed that. Zed was one of the few champions that you could receive for free straight off his release. If you achieved a certain amount of first bloods, then his champion permanent shard will be rewarded to you for free. Here's a terrifying Ivern Shaco. Jen's Ki Barrier is one of the fighting ways of combat technique known as Ki. Riven also has mastered this technique, which is why her W is called Ki Burst. Shyvana's dragon was inspired by wyverns. Beekeeper Singed was actually an old custom skin before it became a real skin in game, and they share a lot of similar qualities. Scion's Dance is a reference to Chris Farley's audition for the Chippendales. Believe it or not, back in the day, Sivir was the first champion to have a 10-point rating for ability power. Skarner comes from the Swedish word skarn, which means waste rocks. Sona was one of the targets of Jin in his teaser, and was even shot in the lore. After she was shot, Riot even changed her champion icon on the website and even added in this teaser. Because Soraka was one of the very early champions added into League, she didn't have her own theme. So when revealing her in the Legends of Runeterra, they decided to use Elementalist Lux's theme instead. Swain almost had an ultimate that allowed him to snipe enemies after absorbing spells, but it was eventually scrapped. Silas has no name due to his family being on the lower end of the social ladder, but if they did need to refer to him as something more than Silas, they usually would just call him Silas Drakeborn. SKT1 Syndra's recall was thought up by Faker himself. Before Tahm Kench was released, his laughter could be heard if a champion laughed while standing in the river, and as you can see, it was terrifying. Hylia is confirmed to be a Virgo. Her birthday is specifically on September 22nd. Did you know that Talon's ultimate Shadow Assault was originally tested as a basic spell? It may have been a little bit busted if that became a reality. During development, Taric was called Gem Knight. In one of the April Fool Day patches a while back, one of the changes regarding Teemo was listed as cuteness increased by 10%. So cute. Thresh is between 1050 and 1100 years old. When Static Shiv was still in the game, and when Tristana bought it, she'd have a voice line where she'd say,
Ooh, look! I'm a shock trooper.
as a reference to Star Wars. If you've never seen it before, look how ugly the old Trundle looked. This was his old splash art, and this was some of his early concept arts too. My dude was a little nasty. Demon Blade Tryndamere was one of the first legendary skins added into League, and back then, it got its own private trailer for its release. It was basically a little movie trailer, but for a skin instead. The dude was teleporting all over the place in it too. It was pretty crazy.
Whatever you do, don't make a sound.
You like my weapon? Come on over for a closer inspection.
The Odyssey Twisted Fate skin has a Bard Meep as a trophy on his belt. Vandal Twitch has a skull on his shirt on the splash art, but in the game, there's nothing there. Udyr was the first champion released after the official October 27th, 2009 launch of the game, and also one of the only champions to be thrown into weekly champion rotation on the day of their release. The other was Poppy. There's a Crab Rave version of Urgot for better top wins on YouTube. That's all I'll say. I'd very much recommend dropping this in chat at the end of the game though. Technically speaking, Varus isn't wearing any clothes. The so-called pants he's wearing is actually a manifestation of corruption, so I guess they're just natural pants-ish. League of Legends meets Dark Souls, I guess. Honestly, the rolling is a little too accurate in this case, but either way, I gotta appreciate the effort. This person made a fan-made skin of what Guardians of Sans Vigar would look like with spells. And honestly, some of these animations already look like they're a part of the game. Pretty crazy. Vel'Koz's eye can be removed from his body, and the largest eye can even fly, which is even seen when he dies. On average, Vex players get 0.0014 pentakills per match. Nice. Psyops Vi is a reference to Bakugo from My Hero Academia. This is what Viego looked like before he went crazy. Victor is voiced by Owen Thomas, who is also the voice actor for Twisted Fate. Vladimir is a pessimist, with a quote even confirming it where he says,
My cup is half empty.
here's some fan art of what Space Groove Volibear could look like. In the Grey Warwick skin splash art, there's a blade of the Ruined King impaling him through his chest. You should probably get that checked out. Additionally, this skin and the medieval Twitch skin used to be obtainable through the old Refer Friend system. The person who created Wukong's staff, Doran, is the same person who created Master Yi's helmet, but he also learned all he knows from being a blacksmith from Ornn. These are some beautiful mock-ups of Rakan and Zaya's splash arts created by Riot, and while it may not be the one they decide to go with, it's still a pretty great piece of art. According to the lore, Xerath is between 3000 and 3050 years old. The name Xerath also means one who shares an ancient Shuriman. Winged Hussar Shin Zhao was released in celebration of the Polish server's launch. Someone asked Riot how to play Yasuo a while back, and for a response, someone wrote an entire essay. Now I'm not going to read all of it, but feel free to pause it and read it for yourself. All I got from this is that you need to grow out your hair and rock a shitty man bundle. One of the legitimate reasons for adding Yone into the game was to lower Yasuo's pick rate since he had the highest pick rate in the game. York is named after the deceased court jester from Hamlet by Shakespeare. The scrapped name for bop and block on Yumi was protect and attack. Earth can be seen in Zack's pool during his recall animation. Zed's favorite pupil is Kayn, whom he treats as his own son and chooses to be his successor. While Zeri and Echo are on the same team together, there's a little buff that comes up which says Zonite Ingenuity. Kids from the Undercity stick together. Additionally, when they assist in a kill, both of them get 1 extra gold. Sugar Rush Ziggs was actually inspired by this fan splash art, and as you can see, there's a lot of similarities between the two. Zillion is more than 3,500 years old and was present during the fall of Icathia. During development, Zoe was called Mirror Mage mainly because she was going to have mirrors in her kit. Additionally, she was also going to look a lot older than she looks now. Zyra was originally going to be called Azalea, like the flower, but it was eventually changed. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to poke that sub button if you enjoyed. Massive shout out to my tier 3 patrons, Steph, Noctec, and James. A huge shout out to Dr. Bronze for being a tier 4 patron, and thank you so much to all my other patrons as well. All right, bye.